She was a flight attendant. He was in seat 24C, jeans, white t-shirt, single backpack. Nobody, that's what her colleague thought. So she poured the coffee on him, hot, on purpose, and smiled. What she didn't know, what nobody on that flight knew, was that he'd been doing this for 3 months, flying his own airline, in coach, watching, waiting to see who his people really were when they thought no one important was. Looking. One crew member ignored him, one mocked him on the intercom, and one, just one, crouched down in the aisle and said, "I'm sorry. That wasn't right." She didn't know who he was. That's exactly the point. Stay with me, because what happened when that plane landed is something I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. There's a question that doesn't get asked enough in this world. Not in boardrooms, not in job interviews, not in the places where people are measured and evaluated and ranked. The question is this: who are you when nobody important is watching? Not who do you perform to be, not the version of yourself you present when the stakes are visible, but the real one, the one that shows up in the small moments, in the side glances, in the way you treat the person who can't do a single thing for you. Most people never have to face that question directly. They go their whole careers without ever being truly tested by it. But on a Tuesday morning in the fall of 2022, at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, that question was answered in real time by 3 different people, and the consequences of those answers would reshape careers, end a job, and become the kind of story that spreads because it feels too true to be fiction. This is that story. His name was Cole Merritt, 44 years old. Born in Macon, Georgia, the middle child of a school bus driver and a hospital administrator. He grew up in a house where money was managed carefully, where nothing was wasted, and where the phrase, "you earn what you get," wasn't just something parents said. It was a value that got absorbed into the bones. His mother worked double shifts. His father took the overnight route on Fridays so he could be at Cole's Saturday morning baseball games. They were not rich people, but they were deliberate people, and Cole paid attention. He put himself through Georgia State on a combination of financial aid, part-time work at a car rental counter, and a singular focus that his friends described with a kind of affectionate bewilderment as almost unsettling. He wasn't driven in a loud way. He was driven in a quiet, consistent, relentless way, the kind of drive that doesn't announce itself, it just shows up, every day, at the same intensity, regardless of whether anyone is noticing. By 29, Cole had saved enough to lease a single turboprop aircraft, partner with a regional airfield operator in South Georgia, and launch what he called, with characteristic understatement, a small connecting service, 2 routes, 14 seats per flight, a staff of 9 including himself. He handled everything from scheduling to customer calls to occasionally loading bags when his one ground crew worker was sick. He named the airline SkyBridge Regional Air. Nobody had heard of it. For the first 2 years, that was true of nearly everyone. But Cole wasn't building for attention. He was building for survival first, then for something he had a harder time naming, some idea about what flying should feel like for regular people. Not glamorous, not theatrical, just dignified, comfortable, human. By 2016, SkyBridge had grown to 12 aircraft and operated across 9 southeastern cities. By 2019, they had 41 planes and over 1,000 employees. Cole had taken on investors by then, brought in a board, hired a leadership team, moved into a proper headquarters in Atlanta's Midtown. The company had changed. It had to. You can't run a 1,000-person operation the same way you run a 9-person one. But Cole had always held on to a private discomfort with that growth, a feeling he couldn't fully articulate, but couldn't dismiss either. He'd started to notice things in the quarterly reports that numbers alone couldn't explain. On-time performance was strong, revenue was up, customer complaints had ticked upward slightly, but not alarmingly. Nothing in the data was blinking red, but Cole had grown up watching his father drive that school bus, and knowing the difference between a system that works on paper and a system that actually serves the people inside it. He trusted data, but he also trusted something else, a gut-level sense that you can't get from spreadsheets. And in the fall of 2022, he decided to stop reading about the experience and just go have it. The idea wasn't complicated. Cole would fly SkyBridge routes in coach, dressed as an ordinary passenger, with no identification beyond a basic boarding pass booked under a middle name he rarely used. No executive credentials, no advance notice to staff, no camera crew. He wasn't making a television show. He wasn't building a PR campaign. He genuinely wanted to know what it felt like to sit in one of his own seats, be served by his own crew, and move through his own system as someone no one would go out of their way to impress. He did it for 12 weeks, 1 to 3 flights per week, different routes, different times of day, different crew rotations. He kept notes on his phone, but not obviously, more the way someone jots a reminder than the way someone is documenting anything. He wore the same kind of clothes, jeans, plain shirts, a worn backpack he'd had since grad school. He didn't try to look poor. He just didn't try to look like anything in particular. Most of the flights were unremarkable in the way that most things in life are unremarkable. Professional crew, routine service, the ordinary choreography of a domestic flight. He found things to fix, a boarding process that was slower than it needed to be, an in-flight menu that didn't reflect what people actually wanted, a gate crew at one airport that clearly hadn't been given enough staffing to do their job without rushing, operational things, fixable things. But the flight on November 8, 2022 was something different. The route was Atlanta to Charlotte, Flight 1147, scheduled departure 9:40 a.m. Cole arrived at the gate with 20 minutes to spare, found a seat in the corner, and settled in the way he always did, quietly, without drawing attention, present but unobtrusive. The gate area was the usual mix of business travelers, families, people staring at phones. He watched the room the way you watch a room when you're genuinely curious about people and not just passing time. The lead flight attendant working the gate that morning was a woman named Renata Walsh, 12-year veteran with SkyBridge. She had the kind of practiced confidence that comes from knowing your environment completely. The way she moved, the way she spoke to colleagues, even the way she held her body communicated that this was her space, and she understood its rules. Cole noticed her the way he always noticed the senior crew members, experienced, professional, composed. Renata was speaking with a junior crew member near the boarding door. Cole couldn't hear what they were saying, but something in the body language was off. The junior crew member, a younger woman whose name badge Cole couldn't read from where he was sitting, had gone still in the way people go still when they're uncomfortable but managing it. Not reacting, just absorbing. It was a small thing. Cole filed it and moved on. The other crew member was named Maya Chen, 26 years old, 2 years with SkyBridge, originally from Savannah. She'd wanted to be a flight attendant since she was 8 years old, and her grandmother had taken her on a trip to see family in Phoenix. Her first flight, a window seat, the clouds below, the way the world looked different from up there. She'd never forgotten that feeling, and she'd spent her whole adult life building toward the job that could give other people a version of it. She was 2 years in and still felt that way. That's not common. In any industry, in any role, the feeling that drove you to the job in the first place tends to quiet down after a while. It hadn't for Maya. She still walked onto every plane like it meant something, because to her it did. Cole found his seat, 24C, aisle, mid-cabin, stowed his backpack, and settled in. The flight was full. He opened nothing. He watched. That was the whole practice. To sit with the actual experience rather than manage it from a distance. The boarding process finished. The door closed. The safety demonstration happened. The plane pushed back from the gate. Standard. Routine. Cole had been on this route a dozen times in his executive capacity and a handful of times in the past 12 weeks. He knew the rhythm of it. What happened next didn't fit the rhythm. Renata worked the beverage cart down the left side of the cabin. She was efficient, moving quickly, matching names to seats with the ease of someone who had done this so many times it had become automatic. She handed drinks to the man in 22A. She smiled at the woman in 23B. When she reached row 24, she paused, just briefly, the kind of pause that wouldn't register to someone not paying attention. Then the coffee she was holding, a full cup, from the cart, came forward. Not dropped, not slipped, tipped, deliberately and precisely, right into Cole's lap, hot, fast, immediate. Cole's jaw tightened. That was the only visible reaction. Renata said, "Oops," and kept moving without breaking stride. The man in the seat across the aisle, a heavy-set guy in a golf shirt, looked over, registered what had happened, and looked back at his phone without saying anything. Someone 2 rows back laughed. Not loud, just enough. Cole looked down at his jeans. He reached for the thin paper napkin that had been sitting unused on his tray table and pressed it against the fabric, slowly, calmly. He didn't look up. He didn't say a word. In that moment, the truth was this: There was nothing he could do about it. He was a passenger. He was nobody. And the woman who had just poured hot coffee on him knew that, and had counted on it. Maya had been in the rear galley when it happened. She was restacking a rack of cups, half focused on the work, half listening to the ambient sound of the cabin. Then the laugh from 2 rows back reached her, and something about the timing of it made her look up. She saw Cole blotting his jeans with the napkin. She saw the angle of the cart. She saw Renata's back already moving forward, unhurried, and she understood immediately what had happened, not as a guess, not as a suspicion, but with the clarity of someone who had watched enough of these small moments to know the difference between an accident and a choice. She put the cups down. She walked up the aisle to row 24. She crouched down beside Cole's seat so she was at eye level with him rather than above him, and she spoke quietly, without theater, without the performed sympathy that people use when they want to be seen being kind. "I'm really sorry about that," she said. "Can I get you something? Club soda? A dry towel? Anything?" Cole looked at her for a moment. He was measuring something, not suspiciously, but with the careful attention of someone who wanted to understand what he was actually seeing. "I'm fine," he said. "I want to help," she said. "I know," he said. That's the difference. She didn't fully understand what he meant. But she stood up, went back to the galley, and brought him club soda and a stack of extra napkins without being asked again. Then she went back to her work. No announcement, no pointed look at Renata, just a quiet correction offered and completed. 40 minutes later, somewhere over the Carolinas, Renata picked up the intercom. What she said was not something that could have been accidental. It was deliberate in the way that things said over an intercom on a commercial aircraft are always deliberate. You pick up a handset, you press a button, you choose your words, you speak into a microphone that broadcasts to every person on the plane. She said, "Just a note from your crew today." Some passengers seem to think that getting on a plane gives them a kind of status, a sense that the altitude changes who they are. A pause. "It doesn't." A few people laughed. The man in the golf shirt chuckled. Some of the cabin didn't know who she meant, but some did, and the ones who did looked toward row 24. Cole was looking out the window, not away, not hiding, just somewhere else, like the whole thing was weather, like it would pass. His expression did not change. Maya was standing at the curtain of the rear galley. She heard it happen. She felt something move through her that was part fury, part grief, part something older and harder to name. The recognition of a moment that has a right answer and a wrong one and a cost attached to choosing. She said, out loud, the only word she could find, "Don't." It wasn't loud. It wasn't directed at the cabin. It was one word aimed at one person, and the person it was aimed at heard it. Renata lowered the intercom. She didn't acknowledge Maya. She walked to the back of the plane. But as she passed row 24, she leaned down close to Cole's ear and said, quietly, like it was a promise, "By the time we land, you'll know exactly where you stand." Cole turned and looked at her directly. His voice was even. "Sometimes what looks like nothing is everything," he said. "You'll understand that soon." Renata straightened up, made a small dismissive sound and walked away. The descent announcement came. Seat belts, tray tables, the routine language of arrival. Cole waited until the cabin had emptied most of the way before he stood, pulled his backpack down, and walked to the front of the plane. Maya was standing at the door. She met his eyes. "Whatever happened in there," she said. "I want you to know I didn't think it was right." He stopped, looked at her. "You didn't just think it," he said. "You said it out loud when it was easier not to." "I didn't say enough." "You said it once," he said. "That's more than most people manage." He stepped off the plane. The jetway at Charlotte opened into a wide terminal corridor. Cole walked out, and 6 people were standing there. Not family, not friends. Men and women in dark suits, hands folded, posture professional. Beside them, 2 senior members of SkyBridge's executive leadership team. Lanyards visible, faces carrying the expression of people who had been briefed on a situation they hadn't fully prepared for. The regional VP of operations stepped forward. He extended his hand. "Mr. Merritt, welcome to Charlotte. Everything's ready." The corridor was busy. People moved around them, rolling bags, checking phones, doing what people do in airports. But several stopped. Not because of the suits, because of something in the arrangement. The posture of the executives, the way they oriented themselves toward the man in the coffee-stained jeans. Renata came through the door 10 seconds later. She saw it immediately. Her rolling bag stopped. Her face changed, not quickly but completely. The way something doesn't look like it's changing until it already has. She recognized the VP of operations. She had met him at a company briefing. She had smiled for a photo with him at a staff event. He was one of the most senior leaders in the company, and he was standing with his head slightly inclined toward the passenger she had poured coffee on. She stood at the edge of the corridor for a long moment. She could not move. Maya came through the door behind her. She saw the same thing. She stood still. She didn't perform a reaction. She was just present, the way someone is present when they've done what they could and they know it. Cole shook hands with the executives. He didn't perform it. He didn't make it a moment. He just was. One of the people with him leaned over and said something quietly. Cole nodded. Then he turned and looked back at the door. He looked at Renata for a long moment without speaking. Then he turned to the executive team. "Can you bring the full cabin crew out here?" It took 4 minutes. Renata, Maya, and 2 other crew members who had been working Flight 1147 came out and stood in a loose line in the corridor. Other travelers had slowed. Some stopped entirely. There is something about a moment of reckoning that is hard to look away from, even when you don't fully know what you're watching. Cole stood in front of them, backpack still on, coffee stains still on his jeans. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. 3 months ago, he said, I started traveling on our own routes, not to audit, not to catch anyone in something. I wanted to know what it actually felt like to be a passenger on SkyBridge, what the real experience was, whether the company I built still matched what I wanted it to be. He paused. Today, I have my answer. He looked at Renata. She tried to hold his gaze. She couldn't. I sat in seat 24C, he said. Plain clothes, nothing to identify me. And before we crossed the state line, I had been deliberately ignored, publicly humiliated over the intercom, and had a full cup of hot coffee poured onto my lap. A pause. Not spilled. Poured. Renata's mouth opened. No sound came out. I was there, he said. I know what I experienced. Her eyes were filling. Cole's voice did not soften. It stayed level. It stayed steady. It had the quality of something final. Not cruel, but absolute. The passengers on every flight we operate paid for a seat on an airline I own. They deserve to be treated like human beings, regardless of what they're wearing, regardless of what they look like, regardless of whether anyone in the room knows who they are. He paused again, especially when they don't look important. That's the moment when character shows. He looked directly at Renata. Effective now, your employment with SkyBridge is terminated. The executive team has your paperwork. The sound she made was small, like something inside her had simply given out. Please, she said. Her voice broke in a clean, irreparable way. One chance, I'll fix it. Cole's voice did not change. You had chances, he said. When the cart moved, when you picked up the intercom, when you walked past her. He paused. You made choices each time, every single one. Renata put her hand over her mouth. Cole turned to Maya. Maya was standing still. She wasn't performing composure. She wasn't performing anything. She was just there, present and quiet, the way someone is when they did what they could and they know it. Cole looked at her for a moment before speaking. You offered water when no one asked you to, he said. You apologized for something that wasn't your fault. You said one word to someone who outranked you, out loud, in front of passengers, when it would have been easier and safer to stay quiet. He paused, and on the way out, you looked a stranger in the eye and told him you didn't think it was right. Not later, not privately, right there. Maya said nothing. That's not a small thing, Cole said. Most people look at a moment like that and decide it's too complicated, too risky, not worth what it costs. He looked at her steadily. You decided differently. He glanced at the VP beside him. Maya moves into cabin crew leadership, full compensation adjustment, immediate effect. He looked back at her. You're going to help us understand what this is supposed to feel like from the inside. Maya exhaled. Not a sound, just the body releasing something it had been holding without realizing it. Thank you, she said. The words came out barely above a whisper. Cole shook his head. Thank you, he said. Don't let anyone tell you it wasn't enough. He walked away from the corridor. The executives fell in beside him. The travelers who had stopped watching started moving again, slowly, the way people move when they've witnessed something they're still processing. Renata stood where she was for a long time. The terminal moved around her, everyone going somewhere, everyone with a direction, and she was just still, her bag beside her, her uniform suddenly feeling like something borrowed from a version of herself she no longer recognized. 3 weeks later, Maya stood at the front of a briefing room on the 4th floor of SkyBridge's Atlanta headquarters. 12 new cabin crew hires sat in rows in front of her, notebooks open, some of them nervous, some of them eager. She had notes. She didn't look at them. The job is simpler than people make it sound, she said. You'll be in the air with hundreds of people every single day. Some of them will be easy. Some of them will not be. Some of them will look like they belong, and some of them won't. Some of them will be kind to you. Some of them won't be that either. She paused. The ones who don't look like they belong, they're watching to see what you do. Not because they want to catch you in something. Because they've been in that position before, and they've learned to look for the answer to a question they stopped expecting good news about. The room was quiet. Treat everyone the same, she said. Not because you might get caught if you don't. Not because there might be a camera somewhere or a regional VP at the gate. Treat everyone the same because it is the only thing that is actually worth doing. She let it sit in the room for a moment. That's the whole job. 2 floors above her, Cole was at his desk. He was on a call. Something about expansion, new routes, a potential partnership in the mid-Atlantic corridor. The kind of conversation that should have had his complete attention. His eyes kept drifting. On the corner of his desk, folded and slightly wrinkled, was a thin paper napkin from Flight 1147, the one he had used to blot the coffee from his jeans. He didn't know exactly why he had kept it. He thought he did. He wasn't entirely sure. He ended the call, sat back and looked at the napkin for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and dialed downstairs. Can you ask Maya if she has 15 minutes? She came up and knocked twice. He gestured to the chair across the desk. Sit down, he said. Tell me how the training went. She sat and told him. He listened, not in the way that executives sometimes listen, with one part of their attention on the room and the rest already somewhere else, but in the full, deliberate way that he had learned from watching his father come home from a long shift and still manage to be completely present at the dinner table. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Was it hard, he said, standing up in front of a room and talking about something that personal? She thought about it honestly. A little, she said. But not for the reason you'd expect. It wasn't hard because of what happened on the flight. It was hard because I kept thinking about everyone else on that plane, who saw it and didn't say anything. And I kept asking myself, if I had been further away, if I hadn't seen the angle of the tray clearly, if I'd had more to lose at the time, would I still have said it? Cole looked at her. Would you have? She met his eyes. Yes, she said. I don't think the distance would have changed it. He nodded slowly. Neither do I. They sat for a while after that, talking about the training program, about what the new hires had asked, about what they still needed to build. It was a work conversation, but something had settled between them that wasn't about work. The quiet kind of thing that builds between two people who have already said the important thing and understand they don't need to repeat it. 4 months after Flight 1147, SkyBridge held its annual company gathering, a downtown Atlanta hotel. Ballroom, 1,200 people, crew members, gate agents, operations staff, executives, corporate employees, open bar, a program. The kind of event where speeches get made by people who are practiced at making them. Cole was on stage. He talked about the year, revenue, expansion, the new routes launching in the spring, the operational improvements that had come out of a company-wide service review. He acknowledged the teams. He moved through the program the way he moved through most things, steadily, without excess. Then he stopped. Not dramatically, not for effect. He just stopped. The way someone stops when they were going to say one thing and then decided to say something true instead. I want to tell you all a story, he said, about a flight and a napkin and a woman who said one word when it would have been easier not to say anything at all. The room shifted. The comfortable posture of a crowd that had been listening politely changed into something more alert, more present. Something in his voice had changed, had dropped the register that speakers use when they're performing and found the one they use when they mean it. He told the story. Not the version with the executives in the corridor and the formal termination and the leadership appointment. He told it from the inside, from seat 24C, the water that came and the water that didn't, the intercom, the coffee, the napkin, the one word in the rear galley. He told it plainly, without making himself the central figure, without framing it as a lesson. I built this company from 3 planes and a personal guarantee on a loan that I had no business making, he said. From an office that was 1 room above a tire shop in Macon, Georgia. From more nights than I can count when I genuinely didn't know if we were going to make it. He paused. And the most important thing I witnessed in 11 years of building it, I saw from a middle seat on one of my own flights. From a flight attendant who didn't know who I was and still gave me club soda and crouched down in the aisle and said she was sorry for something she had nothing to do with. He looked toward the back of the room, where Maya was standing near the wall. She was still, not crying, not performing anything. Who you are when no one important is watching, Cole said, is who you actually are. There isn't another version. You don't get to trade the two out. The person you are at seat 24C and the person you are when the executives are watching, those are the same person or they're neither one. A pause. And sometimes, he said, the person in seat 24C isn't nobody. The room erupted. Maya stood at the edge of the crowd as the applause moved through the ballroom. She didn't move for a moment. She let it land. Then the people near her started clapping and she felt something happen in her chest. Not pride exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something more like relief, the feeling of having finally understood why something that happened to you was worth what it cost. Later, she was on the hotel balcony, the city below, the sky above. She was holding a glass of water because she had never had much taste for champagne. Cole came out the same door and stood beside her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then he said, "How's it feel?" She thought about it the way she had been learning to think about important questions. Not quickly, not with the first answer that surfaced, but honestly. Like something I've been building toward without knowing I was building toward it, she said. Like it always mattered, but now I know why. He looked at her. There was something in his expression that she hadn't seen in boardrooms or briefing rooms or corridors full of executives. Something unguarded, something that was simply his. It always mattered, he said quietly. I was just too far away to see it. The silence that settled between them after that was the good kind, not the kind that needs filling or explaining. The kind that two people make slowly, without trying, by being honest with each other over and over until it becomes the only way they know how to talk. Some people spend their whole lives performing for the wrong audience, trying to look a certain way to people who have already decided what they think, investing their best behavior in the moments when they know they're being watched, and letting everything else slide into something smaller and meaner and easier. They never understand, or they understand too late, that the small moments are the ones that last, the ones that define, the ones that travel further than anything they did in public. Renata Walsh never flew commercially again. She left Atlanta entirely, went back to her hometown in North Carolina. She took a job in retail management and worked quietly, away from the industry she had known for 12 years, carrying the weight of a choice she made on an unremarkable Tuesday morning when she decided that a man in a plain white shirt didn't deserve the same consideration as everyone else. Maya Chen eventually ran the entire cabin operations division of SkyBridge Regional Air. She redesigned the new hire training program from the ground up, built around a principle so simple it almost looked naive on paper. Treat every person in your cabin the same way you would want someone to treat your own family. Not as a policy, as a practice, as a thing you choose, every single flight, regardless of what they're wearing or what they look like, or whether you think anyone important is paying attention. And Cole Merritt, the owner and founder of one of the fastest-growing regional carriers in the Southeast, still flies coach sometimes. Plain clothes, worn backpack, the middle name on the boarding pass, no advance notice, no executive escort. He sits down, watches the room, and waits to see who his people really are. He still has the napkin. It sits on the corner of his desk, folded and slightly wrinkled. He keeps it because it reminds him of something he learned not in a boardroom, or a business school classroom, or a strategy session with expensive consultants, but in seat 24C of a full domestic flight from a young woman who didn't know who he was and said one word anyway, one word, at the right moment, to the right person. And everything changed. The people who treat you well when they think you're nobody, those are the only people worth knowing. And the ones who don't, they've already told you everything you need to know about who they actually are.